Welcome to the Hair Metal Rules Podcast, where we celebrate all things 80s hair and glam rock. Join us as we dive into the world of spandex, big hair, and killer guitar solos with your host, Big J. From iconic bands like Motley Crue and Def Leppard to the lesser-known gems of the era like Lillian Axe and Babylon AD, we cover them all. So grab your hairspray and leather pants because it's time to rock out with the Hair Metal Rules Podcast. Hi everyone, it's great to be back with another exciting episode of the podcast. I'm thrilled to have another special guest joining us today, and I know you're going to enjoy him too. Before we start, how about that killer intro provided to us by Tom Tracy Music? Brother, I never get tired of hearing it from week to week. Thank you so much. I just want to take a moment and thank the listeners who have tuned in. Your support means the world to me. My guest today is Craig Gerber. Craig is no stranger to the Hollywood scene. Not only did Craig's band Wildcard do its turn in the clubs of the Sunset Strip, but he was also Creamin' Craig, a radio personality at the famous WKNAC, the most famous radio station in California back in the 80s. Craig has so many cool and interesting stories to tell. So ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Mr. Craig Gerber to the podcast. Hey Craig, welcome to the Hair Metal Rules Podcast.
Hey Jeremy, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it. We've gone back and forth way before this conversation, and I even called you on the phone and you gave me a few tips on how to bullet points. So
I did. So I will be the guinea pig, anything to do to help you out. I appreciate what you're doing and I love what you're doing, respect what you're doing. So I'm excited to do this with you.
All right. Well, tell me how you got interested in music way back in the day.
Ooh, how much time do we have? No, just kidding. Back in the day, I got into music in probably the second grade. My dad always loved the rock and roll, as in those days of, like Elvis, but Tina Turner and Creedence. So I always grew up watching my dad kind of somewhat rock out. And then Kiss came along, and my friend and I, my best friend at the time, would sit there and try to play records and record and put a cheap microphone to a yardstick and record us. So that's how it originally started. But when it comes to hair metal rules and Hair Nation, the stuff that we love and lived, I got to go back to high school because I was always into rock. Okay. Right. So I was always into the regular rock, like the Foreigner, the Journey, Pat Benatar, Joan Jett. Okay. Yes. But then all of a sudden, I heard Runaway. There's three bands that really got me and unleashed the beast, I heard Runaway from Bon Jovi and I was like, whoa, that's cool, and then hearing Round and Round, and then, definitely. Motley Crue. Oh my God, Live Wire. And so, that was amazing to me. So I have to say the Rat, Motley Crue and Bon Jovi were the top three bands, and then I hear Quiet Riot, Bang Your Head, Yes. Come On, Feel the Noise. And then, all that stuff going. And then you look back at even Judas Priest, I'm just being honest. I didn't like them at first because it was kind of pushed on me at some guy, in high school that my very first band, and then I started, wow, that's good. And then they even kind of got into the hair, with like Turbo and stuff like that. So that's, Rat, Motley Crue definitely is the ones that molded me and unleashed the beast.
Mine was Night Songs by Cinderella.
Ah, yeah.
I heard that, and because my music was Duran Duran, uh, Power Station, 80s pop metal, at the time, because that's all I listened to. And then I heard that, and I didn't turn back, you know?
Yeah.
It's
I
just,
mean, I liked a variety of music, but still the hair metal, it'll never be replicated, I don't think.
it won't be replicated. You hear bands out there that sound, they have the sound, they want to have the look, but I don't I don't think it'll never be what it was in 1985.
Right. That
Yeah.
was that was such a magical time. Um, the things I did back then, it was just I could probably get in trouble for now.
Sure. I'm sure. Well, I mean, it's like I was Justin that I talked to. Nobody wanted to get in trouble. It was fun. People
Yeah.
people got in trouble. I mean, like I told him, you can get in trouble at the grocery store if you really want to.
Oh yeah.
But I wish I had a time machine because I would have loved to have walked the Sunset Strip one time and taking band flyers from these guys, handing them out, and go in the Roxy, Grizzari's, the Whiskey a Go Go. I would have loved to experience that just one time. But being on the East Coast, you read about it, you saw decline of Western civilization, and you got a little taste of it. But
Yeah.
you were actually there playing in some of those
I,
situations.
I was, and there's another one you forgot where we played at was the Troubadour.
The Troubadour,
you know.
yes.
So it was, if you're talking about the band days, that was a rough scene because it got so saturated.
Right.
And then you had to, we call pay to play. You
Yeah.
had to give them money up front to get your time slot. Then you had to print your own tickets, and then you had to sell them to make money. But pretty much you wanted people to show up, so you're basically, passing them out for free. So it was rough to get in, and it was rough to get into clubs. You had to show up hours early. So it would get frustrating at times. It was an amazing scene walking around and
Yeah.
seeing everyone and seeing all the bands and going, who are they? Who were they? And you're
Right.
getting the flyers
Yeah.
just like you said. But then we kind of, I was seeing a message from Dr. Starr, you
Yeah.
know
Do you know him?
and yeah, about how in Orange County we kind of started going, a little bit, because it was easier to get in these clubs. Like there was original club was Joshua's, and then it ended up turning into, drawing a blank right now, the Marquee, because that's what's
Okay.
on the flyer from my band.
I
uh
got you.
so then there was Checks and Goodies. Those were like the top three places that we played as well. You know, speaking on my band days, it was rough. Because what I learned is musicians flakes. Just the way my parents raised me, I was
Right.
always wanted to make sure I'm on time. But when you're dealing with musicians sometimes, and some of them like to act like they already made it, prima donnas, and our
Yeah.
biggest struggle in my band was drummers. We had the worst luck, as in I had drummers quit literally week or two before a show.
Would they go
And
to some another band, or just didn't want to do it?
well, I hope I don't offend anyone, but it was mainly we had that luck of the spouse or girlfriend
Oh, I see.
kind of not liking us or the music, or that, they kind of just like, we had one of our biggest shows at the Marquee, and literally 3 days before the show, the girlfriend, actually she was a wife, came in to our drummer and we had this big blow up at our rehearsal, and
Right.
said, these guys don't care about you, and you're just, this and that. And we're like, what are you talking about? So, and so she quit, and thank goodness my singer's brother's band weren't playing during that week, and we were able to borrow him, and he learned our songs pretty good. And just a lot of eye contact on stage really helps out, when you're trying to start a song or end a song and stuff like that. But that was got a funny story, if you don't mind.
Sure.
One of our big shows at the Marquee, I ended up getting strep throat. So, and it was horrible. And so we're practicing, and my singer goes, hey, when I'm sick, I just power through it and keep singing. So that helps me. So you should do that. So I did it. All it did was make me worse. And I was like, kind of like as I was the guitarist, but I was kind of the lead backup singer.
Right.
So I was able to, the show goes on, right? So this is kind of gross, but I'm sitting there, hey, we're talking about real life stories back in the hair days, right? Yes. So I'm sitting there rocking out on a guitar solo, and next thing you know it, I'm about to come in and do the, some background, and I just kind of clear my throat. And what happens when you have strep throat? Something came and jumped right on my tongue, and I panicked, and I was like, oh no, what do I do? So I thought quick, and I'm rocking the hair to the left, to the right, and then I just hocked this loogie. Yeah. It shot all the way across the wall, and I thought I got away with it until literally 5 years ago. I happened to have at the time, my uncle was at the show, and he was only in his upper 30s. So he was a real cool uncle, wanted to show up. And then we were just sitting around Thanksgiving, and he goes, something came up, and he goes, I saw that. And I'm like, saw what? He goes, that time when you were pretending to rock out and you hawked that loogie against the wall.
Oh, wow. So I did see it.
5 years ago, I just found this out.
5 years ago.
Yeah.
You never know who's looking.
Yeah, that's true.
Did you meet many famous, soon to be get signed bands? Did you play along beside them? Did you play like not tickets, but like what's it called? You got 3 or 4 bands in a row, a package kind of thing?
Yeah, none that I remember. None that, I mean, serious, none that I remember. It was like saturated at those times, and none that I just remember, playing like, the night before, the night after Trickster was there, and some of those bands starting out like that. But no, we never played with anyone super big at that time. But I met a lot more. I mean, tons of, rock stars when I worked at the radio station for KNAC. Right. So that's when that's a whole nother story of meeting some amazing folks in the hair.
My exposure to a lot of the bands were the trade magazines that came out. There was a BAM.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was a Rock City something, maybe.
Kerrang.
Well, I mean, it's this little like a newspaper that was in and it would have ads, the ads you see, Troubadour, to have everybody listen to playing. That's where I learned a lot of bands. And you see a picture. You had Paradise and you had Dice.
Yeah.
And this guy from this band is over here right now, but the other 2 guys are in this band right here. Like, I remember Poison was in 2 separate, not Poison, but Warrant. Those guys were in 2 separate type bands that were playing the Strip, and then they finally came together to form, Warrant.
Yeah,
it was amazing to see all the names of the bands, and those they never went anywhere, because like you said, you had a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy.
Right.
everybody can't be Warrant.
Yeah.
But we can look
You know,
like them and sound like them, you know. So,
back in those days, we kind of talked, it was one of those things of you either had to be extra special, like, Guns N' Roses just hit the scene and wow,
oh
right?
yeah, yeah.
Eddie Van Halen, that guitar,
Right.
master, um, that you had to be something like that or have a rich daddy.
Right. Yes.
That's the truth. It was rough. But it was great years. I wouldn't be regretted. And to share you
Sure.
something else, even though in high school, I had long hair, and back in the day, you're wearing parachute pants and leather pants to school, and
Yeah.
you got your hair feathered at the time,
Right.
and
Right.
I always, because my dad, I was fortunate enough he had his own gasoline business, a couple gas stations,
Hmm.
and so I knew I had a good life, right? We
Right.
weren't rich, but we had a good life. And he
Sure.
provided, got me my first car as a $2,000 El Camino he bought from my grandpa,
El
So
Camino. Nice.
yeah, so and then I ended up with a Trans Am and a hand me down that used to be my brother's, but hey, being rock and roll in a Trans Am, I'll take it.
Yeah. That's nice.
So, I knew that, I had to do the right thing, or, I'd get in trouble,
Yeah.
and it's the way he raised me. So in school, I always did good, got all A's, maybe a B, and I was going to be an architect.
Okay.
I could have got a scholarship to USC,
Wow.
and I didn't do it because I knew if I didn't pursue my dream, and
Sure.
that's the thing. People want to live other people's life, their parents,
Hmm.
I feel good that what I did, that, I said, you know what? Not to sound like a Twisted Sister video, but I wanted to rock, you know?
There you go.
And then so it was a good, I don't know, 7, 8 year run, living the life in that, having a band, and then working at KNAC radio station. It's priceless. I wouldn't be here right now if I didn't pursue my dream talking to you.
So at what point did you eventually with Wild Card say, okay, this has gone about as far as it can go? Did you have jobs during the day that to get money to keep the band and buy clothes and buy, because you said you'd have to pretty much pay your way
Mm-hmm.
into some of the gigs, but you had to
Yeah.
sell tickets to try to make that money back. How much, if you don't mind me asking, how much would that have costed you to
To
play in a place?
At that time, I'm thinking it was, like, if I'm now, just remember, there's people out there that are haters, right? I'm doing the
Sure,
best I can to remember what
sure.
I lived, not what they lived.
This is
So for
about
me,
you, nobody else. Yeah,
yeah. So usually, I remember our one show. I think we had to pay $500.
wow.
Yeah, for back then, that was a lot.
Oh yeah, heck
I
yeah.
still, I will send it to you. I still, back in the day, you didn't think you need to save all this stuff. I have so much stuff that I'd never saved of some of our shows and stuff. But I still found our old contract from that show. I found it just literally like last year.
Wow.
And I was like, no way. So, but it was about $500. So for me, I was fortunate enough to start working for my dad.
Right.
I started in high school, my senior year in high school, and my dad didn't hand me anything, made me work for it. I'm cleaning the pumps, the gas
Right.
pumps. Yeah, I would, and then I had to work on weekends.
Yes.
And that was it. So I can focus on high school, and I come in Friday for a half a day to clean everything, and then had to open up the gas station. So when you go and you play, or you go and have fun, and you get home at 3 a.m., you got to wake up at 2 a.m., or I mean, at 5 a.m.
Go
to
to
get to
work.
the gas station to open by 6.
Right. No, was
So
that $500? Was that just one gig, or was that like
no,
so many nights?
that was one gig.
Good night.
Yeah, and
Wow.
my singer, his name was John Forbes. Um, Lost contact with him. I'd love to. There's how many John Forbes there are, but he was a painter, so he painted houses,
Okay.
and so he made decent money as well. And my bass player, his name was Paul Guerrero. Like I said, once I got out of the industry, I kind of just started living a normal life, but lost contact with a lot of people because we didn't have smartphones. Facebook,
Yes.
Instagram, and how many Paul Guerreros there were. And so he worked
Yeah.
at Toys R Us in Hollywood. So we all had jobs. And then I called myself one of the busiest people in the world because then I'm working at KNAC 1 or 2 days a week, along with the band and having band practice, and then we'll talk about the KNAC
Right.
days in a little bit. But, I was just talking about at this time, I was so busy. Then I managed my dad's gas station because he had an issue, and I'm 19 and I'm like, yeah, I'll do it, So then I'm working Monday through Friday. And then we have band practice over by Angel Stadium. There was this studio that gave you a discount if you came late. So we would practice Tuesdays and Thursdays from 10 to 1 a.m.
Wow.
And then I was on the KNEC softball team. And so we're playing every other Sunday. And then I was on the KNEC bowling team. We had to do it Mondays from like 9 to midnight. I was so busy, I didn't even have time to sleep.
That's what I say. When did you ever sleep?
Yeah, I didn't.
When you could, right?
Mondays were my day to go home, and after work, I would get off a little early on a Monday at like 2:30 in the afternoon. I'd go home and I would turn the volume on the phone down and take a nap.
There you go. Get you a cat nap. Well, cat naps will take you a long way sometimes, but then you just kind of just eventually you just crash.
Heck, especially now that
Oh,
I'm 56, I love a good nap. I'm
trust
not
me. Yeah,
afraid to admit it.
I like to take my naps too. Don't feel bad about that. So, what got you involved in KNAC?
This is a very interesting story.
Okay.
It started when I was probably just getting out of high school. And KNEC at that time was just a phenomenon because nobody out there played heavy metal.
Right.
I don't care what you call it, speed metal, heavy metal, bubblegum rock, hair metal, any form of hard rock.
Right.
They were the first of its kind. Okay. So being that I worked at my dad's gas station before I became a manager, I'm working on the weekends. So when I'm there, opening the gas station at 6 a.m. on a weekend, no one's around,
Right.
So I'm listening to KNEC on the radio there. And then at those times, they're giving away, concert tickets, or hey, a KNEC t-shirt. I was winning all the time. So I had to drive up. It was about an hour away to Long Beach to go pick up my stuff.
Right.
So, I was fortunate. I kind of had the look already in high school, and so I started getting to know the receptionist that was, more than a receptionist, but her name was Veronica. I think her name was Veronica Ybarra. So I started to get to know her. I was winning so many concert tickets and t-shirts, and she's like, how are you doing this? I'm like, I was caller 10,
Yeah.
So
right.
then I'm like, it just kind of came up like, I want to work here. This would be cool. Or the joke came up like, come up so much, you should work here. And to work at KNAC in that time, it was blowing up in just literally 6 months to a year, right?
Right.
That you would want to work there if you were the janitor. You just would want to just tell, I work at KNEC. What do you do there? And proudly you'd say, I'm the janitor because I work at KNEC.
I clean toilets. That's what I do.
That's right. Because KNEC was just like, no way, it was like when MTV came out with Headbangers Ball, but imagine Headbangers Ball all day, all night, right?
Yeah.
So then she said, you know what? You should work here. And then I'm like, wait, what? And she goes, well, wait, how old are you? And I was 18 at the time. And she said, oh, we have a rule. You can't work here until you're 19. And I'm like, are you kidding me? So I had to wait like 6 months. And then soon as I was like, I I contacted her again. I won something and I was up there, and she let me start like a few months before my 19th birthday. And
Right.
then so when you start out, like I said, if you're the janitor or whatever, you start at the bottom. And then I didn't care, so I was answering phones, you know,
Okay. Yeah.
taking down requests. And then so I had to start at the midnight shift, right?
Right.
So like midnight till 3 a.m. for a couple days. And I was working with, I believe it was Nasty Neil was his name. We all had names, right?
Nasty Neil.
So soon as I started, they're like, well, what are we going to call you? And I was like, I don't know, because everyone had a handle.
Right. Yes.
Everyone
Sure.
had a handle. So I kind of started like, I don't know. And he goes, I'll tell you what, we're going to have people come up with names and vote. We're going to vote. I'm like, okay. So I'm sitting there, talking to people. They're calling in, requesting songs, and then they're coming up. And then Neil kind of came up with the top three names. And one of the names was Cream and Craig.
Cream
So
and Craig.
Cream and Craig, it sounds dirty, and it is.
And it is. Yes, sir.
So, and
It
I
was
didn't
it
like.
was meant to be dirty.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I I hated it. I'm like, no way. I don't want. So, and that's the one by far. By the just after an hour, there was like 127 votes for that, and then all these other ones had 9 or 10.
Right.
So that's how I ended up getting adopted the name Cream and Craig, and then I embraced it and owned it, and then I was able to start. I was able to get off that and worked with on Saturday mornings from 6 to 10 was with Filthy Phil. And then he started, this is behind the scenes stuff,
Oh
because you
man.
had to do all this other stuff to become a DJ. No one was leaving because they hit the lottery.
Yeah, it was a pie
You,
job. Everybody wanted
yeah.
it. Yeah.
So I got to work with Filthy Phil, and I'm still in contact. He's a real good friend of mine. He's actually once KNAC kind of, they sold out to some
Yeah.
Hispanic radio station because the tower was down in Mexico. He became the voice of the Mighty Ducks hockey team. So he's still doing that
Okay.
right now. So
Nice.
a lot
Yeah.
a lot of people can look him up on Instagram, Phil Hewlett. And so his radio name, Filthy Phil, he would make people to win. Oh, this was so much fun. We would sit there and judge people and make them called squeal for the goods.
Yes.
So
Okay.
yeah, so we'd make people squeal like a pig to win concert tickets, and we would pick the
Wow.
top three and have a squeal off. And then there was a lot of times he would go do something, and he would like teach me. We were not supposed to go in, because people do stupid things when they were recording. He let me come in all the time. We would hang out all the time, answer phones together, collaborate. He was such a good friend to me. He was like an uncle to me. He really was. And then he would go to the bathroom and said, hey, do this and do this, and then put this in when this ends, and this is the ad, and I was
Yeah.
doing stuff behind the scenes. Never got a chance to be a full DJ, but I got to be a closet one behind the scenes,
Well, that sounds like what you were doing was just as much fun as having to sit and talk on the radio. That's neat.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's like a what is it called when you have somebody that keeps your scheduling off? What is it? No, not an apprentice, but
Well, pretty much. Yeah, I
yeah,
was like his apprentice. Yeah, that's a
right,
good way to say it.
yeah,
And yeah, I did that for years with him. Um, Yeah, that was just some of the greatest times. And then meeting people, because then it evolved, because then, I had my band and my hair kept growing and the look kept evolving into the hair metal, the hair metal rules days.
Yes,
So,
those days.
and then I started, you develop a following, and then they're like, Craig, we want you, on the softball team. We want you to be on the bowling league team, so then you're going every Monday night and you're meeting fans. They would have big things at the Red Onion, that was the big, they would have, KNAC night at the Red Onion, and play all the, Def Leppard and all the hair metal, Warrant and all the good ones. They would play at the Red Onion and stuff. So you get a following. And then Craig, how many concerts I went to was just, I don't even think I can count. Seriously, I would have to, in my lifetime back in those days, of all the concerts I went to for free, just from KNAC and backstage, and handing out T-shirts and bumper stickers and keychains. Craig, we need you to go to this concert, pass out some T-shirts. Craig, we want you on the softball team. And I got a couple pictures online of me in my little outfit, our little jersey, KNAC outfits and stuff like that. And so that was just an amazing, magical time that I'll never forget. And then I realized that, wow, how big it was when it's two stories that really kind of came back to back, that I was like, wow, this is huge. When you have long hair and you look like we did back in those days, you get dirty looks. You get stared at, you get glared at a lot, the parents staring you down. You're just trying to get your car washed. You're trying to just get some food, and you're looked at like a freak, So you start, and you get picked on by the police. I got so many tickets back in those days. But then, you have a chip on your shoulder. So, and I'm driving down El Toro Road one day, down in Mission Viejo, El Toro, Orange County area by where I lived. And then people yelled something. I'm just driving, minding my own business. And I'm driving and people yell something at me. And I was just in a foul mood that day. And they get up in the turn lane. I roll next to them, and roll down my window. I'm like, what the F do you say? I was just so irritated. And then they're like, people in the back of their truck, and they're just like, yeah, Cream and Craig, you rock, and I was just like, I felt like such an idiot. But then
they were yelling at you because they knew who you were.
Yeah. And I was like, whoa, I can't believe they know me from the radio station, and I'm not even a DJ,
Right.
And then we're at concerts. I mean, I hate to say this. I hope my wife doesn't listen to this, but you meet a lot of women.
Sure.
And then one time I'm going to my seats, and this was I know this was when Bon Jovi was still opening up, before he blew up, and he was opening up for Rat back in those days. And so I'm walking through, and then all of a sudden, like, Craig, sign my chest. And then whipping. So I had to start carrying around a Sharpie. I used permanent ink. And it just started becoming an occasional thing,
Yeah.
I'm kind of embarrassed to share that, because I'm a lot different person right now, but than I used to be. But
that was life. That was the 80s.
It was.
It's cool that you were on the West Coast and this big radio station. The only time I ever got to listen to any kind of hair metal on the radio at all, I talked about it in the first podcast I did. North Carolina State University, which is right down the road, NC State, they had a college radio station there. And I remember in high school, where my grandpa lived, I had to park my car a certain way under a tree. And I could pick the reception up from that. And for 3 hours on Saturday, from 12 to 3, they played hair metal. And I would write these bands down, and then I'd go to the record store, which was a cassette store, because that's what it was, cassettes, and try to find these guys. That's the first time I ever heard like Leatherwolf.
Yeah.
I ever
I was
heard.
actually friends with them. It's because they were from Orange County out in that way, and a friend of my ex-girlfriend at the time was really good friends with Dean, the
Dean, yeah, the
drummer.
drummer,
Yeah.
yeah.
So got to hang out with them, you
That
know.
and that was such a, they were such a cool, that was a good band. I mean,
Yeah,
they
Triple
were
Axe
really,
Attack.
really, yeah. And that's
Yeah.
the first time I ever heard like Hurricane Alice. That's the first time I ever heard DeMolls. Remember DMOLLS? That was a band. But London, that's the first time I ever heard London, Odin, that kind of stuff. And that was my exposure to, and I thought it was a thrill that I could pick it up at my parents' house from time to time. And I'd take the old Memorex cassette tape and slap it in my stereo and start recording it. And it's what I would listen to, in my car. And you go to high school and like, here's a copy of what I recorded on the radio station. And then, well, I recorded this on Tuesday, and you just swapped that out. And there was no band exposure here
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
than you go in the dime store, well, CVS, Revco, whatever it was called, time, and you got a copy of Metal Edge magazine. And I begged my mom to give me a subscription to Rip magazine, and I
Rip
read
was my favorite.
that was the best magazine ever, the best. I'm telling you, I
I
liked
do have
Metal Edge because
yeah.
Metal Edge would have the not like the news section, but it have a section in there. Stephen Piercy's left Rat, and he's getting together with Fred Coury from Cinderella, and they're putting together Arcade, little tidbits like that, and you learned. But yeah, Rip magazine, that was the granddaddy right there. I loved it.
Yeah. And then Rat was and still is one of my favorites. There
Yeah.
was just something about, and because of Rat is once I got to that point in my band days, I started playing Charvel Jackson guitars because of
Right.
Rat. I just dug their sound and loved Robin Crosby. And today is the anniversary of his death.
Oh, really?
And, yeah, and he was my favorite, and so it really hit home that I didn't realize this until I saw a couple posts that today was his anniversary.
Wow.
So and then a lot of people said I look like him when you go through some of my old pictures.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
I got that a lot. It was either him or Cece, and I'm like, I always got offended when people said I look like Cece because I think Cece was. I'm 6'2". I'm a pretty big dude, you
Yeah.
know. I believe Robin was like 6'5", 6'6",
Yeah. He was a
and
big, tall
he was
fella.
a big dude, a gentle giant. And then, but Cece was like 5'1",
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah. So I always got a little. I didn't say anything, but I always got a little butt hurt when I got told I looked like Cece. I liked Robin, and my best friend, Joe Eckerd. He always had that curly hair, and so he tried to look like Stephen Piercy from our high school days.
Oh, wow.
It
Yeah.
was pretty funny, man. It's how these people influenced you, and it's weird to see how like Taylor Swift. I hate to even bring her up on this show, but how the young girls are trying to be like them. And
Yeah.
the only reason I thought about this is because coming on your podcast, I started thinking back in my high school days that I wanted to be like Rat.
Yeah, exactly. Was I
Yeah.
was a I said on one podcast I was a preppy hair metal guy for the simple fact my dad wouldn't let me grow my hair out.
Uh-huh.
My dad wouldn't let me get my ear pierced, but I did listen to the music. My room, there was not one piece of white paint on the wall that you could see because it was anything you could tear out of Metal Edge. That was the best pinup. That was the best pinup magazine out of all. I mean, every so often they would run a whole magazine with Motley Crue, and they'd be actually a huge poster inside the, my room was covered in that. But I had short hair, but I did wear the t-shirts, and I listened to the music and all. And but here in North Carolina, like I say, on the East Coast, you had bands on the East Coast, but they were in the magazines, but you didn't see that exposure till the Headbangers Ball came out. And the Headbangers
Yeah,
Ball
yeah,
was the greatest program that all the hair metal bands ought to thank MTV and Headbangers Ball, because if it wasn't for them, you'd have never heard Round and Round on commercial radio.
yeah. And then all the girls freaking out over Bret Michaels,
Yeah.
and
You'd
yeah,
have
they,
never heard Talk Dirty to Me on commercial
yeah.
radio. And that's when you heard that, that's when those cats blew up, and that's when they started making money and selling albums. And, they just think they're lucky stars that existed.
I agree with you. I mean, just MTV in general, just blew people's mind. Like, that's what they look like.
There
Wow.
you go. Yeah.
Motley Crue. Wow. Those guys are crazy. They're nuts. I want to be like them.
First time I ever saw Motley Crue, and I ain't afraid to admit it, it was on the cover of Circus magazine. And this was before I even got into hair metal. And they had their, their makeup on, and Lord, my mind went blank. The lead singer, Vince Neil, had a mesh shirt on, and you could see his nipples through the mesh. And I thought it was a girl. I thought I was seeing girl. I thought I was seeing girl nipple.
So you kind of liked it at first.
I kind of liked it at first, yeah, until I figured out, wow, those are guys. But yeah, seeing going on the Headbangers Ball is where I was introduced to a little bit more of the obscure bands, because that was what my clique was. The little ad in Metal Edge that introduced Baton Rouge. They introduced Heaven's Edge.
I loved Heaven's Edge.
Yeah, Babylon AD, this kind of stuff, these big spreads. But that's the ones that I went to instead of, Rat's new albums coming out, or Motley Crue is getting ready to release a new album. Those are the bands that I always gravitated to. And that's the ones I try to post on Instagram anytime I can.
Yeah.
People like, man, I forgot all about those guys.
You know. Unlocking all these things. It's funny, just to comment on something you said about having your hair long. That's what happened to me with my dad in 11th grade. They're like, Greg, you got your haircut, because my dad was so worried what people would think. Right.
That's my parents too. Yes.
So, and that's why you got to go to college. You got to, and this. And finally, I stood up to my dad and I said, "Aren't I doing good working for you?" Yeah. Got all A's in school. Yeah. I'm growing my hair long.
I'm growing my hair longer. Yeah.
And what could they say?
Right.
They kind of were just like, oh man. And right at that time, I knew I was a natural born salesman.
There you go. There you go. You sold your dad. That's the biggest sale you could have.
Yeah. Yeah. So I got a great KNAC, before I forget, and Rat story for you. Something I'll never forget. Working then I stopped working with Phil. I started working with the famous Ton Mastery, God rest her soul, as well as Robin. And but she was very, like, the top DJ there, and she had a huge following. And so I started working with her. And you get to know people over 6 years. And then when finally I was just, as I'm managing my dad's gas station still, I know Rat's going to be there around 4:00. So this is my chance to meet Rat. Okay. And so I'm driving up there and stuck on the 405, just crazy traffic like you wouldn't believe. And I'm just getting so frustrated listening to the radio station, and I'm still not there. I'm missing all this stuff. And then they are about to, or they just played Way Cool Jr. They just unleashed it for the first time. And so I was just like, that's interesting. And they're like, so Ton says, so tell me, what is Way Cool Jr. about? And Bobby Blotzer, he kind of chimes in and goes, well, it's one of those things that, Way Cool Jr. is like, you go to that bar, you go to that club, you're at that concert, and that one chill, cool dude is just, the chicks are digging him. He's just got it. So basically, kind of like Cream and Craig. We basically wrote that song about Cream and Craig.
Oh, is that what he said?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I went unglued in my car. Okay.
Wow.
So and finally I get there in about 15 more minutes. I get there and then I'm just like, no way. Am I going to be in trouble? Because there was a program director at that time. I believe his name was Tom Marshall. He was like a littler dude with a beard, but he was kind of like Belichick, that used to coach the Patriots.
Yeah.
Very monotone,
Yeah.
didn't have a personality, and fired a lot of people.
Right.
And so we all had the fear of him, And so I was like, I'm in there. And then when I saw Ton during a commercial break and they're all going and meeting other people and stuff, she's like, did you tell him to say that? And I'm like, no, did you tell me? We were just like a bunch of little girls because she knew how much I loved Rat.
Right.
And so I don't know who told them or said something, and then I had to play it cool because then Tom, the program director, he's like, can I see you in my office? And I'm like, So I go in his office, first time he's ever called me in his office. And he goes, did you hear that? And I'm like, uh-huh.
Yeah, I heard it.
Yeah. And he goes, I always am recording 24 hours a day to make sure people are doing what they're supposed to do and not say what they're not supposed to say. But you want me to give you a recording of that? I was so stunned and shocked that he was being kind. Not that he was mean, but he just was very Bill Belichick. That's all I could say.
Being kind was not in his normal nature.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I tried to play it off cool. I'm like, no, that's okay. Thank you. And that's one of my biggest regrets still to this day that I don't have that on recorded. I wish I could find a way to get that because that was probably one of the coolest things. And then they stayed in town for a couple of days. So then it was Halloween. So then we had a big thing at this this Camelot type place. I'm trying to remember the name of it, that they would do the horse jousting and the dinner and stuff. And so we had, so it wasn't the whole band, but it was Warren, Robin, and Bobby.
Okay.
No, no, I'm sorry. It wasn't Warren. It was Juan. So, because I was peeing right next to him at the place. So,
right.
So, but that was cool to hang out with them. And then I got used to being around rock stars, and they dug hanging out with me because I didn't get starstruck. I talked to them about anything, that they just had a baby, and I'm talking to them about that, not just about, they go on these interviews. They're touring and going on talk shows, and they're talking about the music, the band, the same thing. So I kind of just acted cool with them, and they dug hanging out with me. So that was probably one of my coolest ever stories of, with rock stars and meeting them. Another cool one is when Bon Jovi, these bands would call the radio station and say, hey, we need like 200 people. We're shooting a video. And they would wait to the last second so the word didn't get out and pandemonium would hit. Right. They're like, we need 200 people at this location in about 4 hours. So I'm in Bad Medicine video. I got to go to the taping of that, and I'm right up front in the video. And then I'm in All the Fools Sailed Away. I had to go to Malibu. To Ronnie James Dio video. So you see me walking on the ship with my ex-girlfriend at the time. That's pretty darn cool, to be able to do that because of KNAC.
Right. It was such a big. I've always heard of that radio station, but just reading about it, it was big, it was huge, it was like you said, the only place you could go tune in and listen to nothing but hair metal, hard rock, but I think it was smart that the station, that's what they played, because that's what was going on. Why would you not play it?
Yeah, yeah. That was I just, I look back at, as we're talking all this stuff out, because I still have a Dawkins story in a minute. But as I look back, I almost feel like I loved my days more at the radio station than in my band.
Well, I can see that. I can see that.
As I'm talking about, I mean, there's things you just don't remember anymore, but as you talk it's like all popping up. They used to have this thing called the Foundations Forum. It's all the people in the record industry would meet, the hard rock, it was a hard rock thing. And because I was 6'2", but then when you add the hair and then you're wearing heels on boots and stuff like that, you're almost 6'4". They wanted me to be security. So
Okay.
I remember my one job, and we're all staying at the hotel, and there's like 8 of us sharing a hotel, guys and girls that worked at KNAC. And then my one job for that day was to escort Don Dokken to his room and then back down because he was going to speak for an hour, right?
Right.
Well, that didn't go very well because he was like, "Squirrel, shiny thing, where's the bar? I'm buying you a drink." So we were all over the map. I did my best to, corral him, but it was fun just hanging out with him and just talking and doing our thing. And because of that moment too, I got to hang out with him. And then there was, all the hard rock girls were starting to come out, right?
Right.
So Vixen was leading it at that time, but then there was another band called Precious Metal. Yeah. So then because I accidentally went into a wrong room, Precious Metal was there and they were going to do something. I think they were going to play or something. And then I started talking to one of the girls. I find out she's the guitarist in the band. And then so we joked and I'm like, "Hey," she thought I was cute. I thought she was cute. I'm like, "Let's get married," joking around. She was like, "Okay." And she's leading me through the hotel to the band, the rest of the band, and all the people involved in the band, the managers and stuff. Like, "This is Cream and Craig. He's my new husband." And we started dating for a little bit,
Wow.
because of that. And the problem was our schedule. It's like 2 celebrities, dating, not that I was a celebrity, but she was busy, I was busy, we couldn't see each other except a couple times, talked on the phone a lot, and it just fizzled out. There was no harm, no foul going on in that relationship. But wow, I just remembered that one from talking about, escorting Don Dokken.
Yeah.
So
that's great. I think it's great that you saw these bands in their prime.
Yeah.
I'm seeing. We go to M3 to see these bands, and there may not be but one of the original members even still in the band, but they're still playing what you want to hear.
Right.
And it's nice to be able to. It's nice to be able to see 3/4 of somebody or whatnot. But I would have loved to. I'd love to have seen, the original lineups and the sound they were putting out, 40 years ago.
That was always hard back in the day. Like when when Vince would leave Motley Crue, for that little bit, and the variety, they tried a female singer, I think once, and then when Tommy left the band for a little bit, that's always hard.
Yeah.
And so let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Because a lot of people are split on Van Halen and Van Hagar, if you know what I mean.
Right.
So what's your take on that whole situation of how you liked Van Halen, and then after David Lee Roth, and then Sammy was in the band for a good amount of time,
Yeah.
What's your take on the Van Halen Van Hagar thing?
I didn't have a problem because I like what Van Halen was with David Lee Roth. I love that music, but I also think that with Sammy Hagar, they had some great tunes. They put out some good stuff, and I don't have to. I don't choose between one or the other because it was, in my opinion, it was just two separate entities. You know
Right.
what I mean? But I OU 812.
Yeah.
I think that has some great songs on it. You
Yeah.
know, it was
So
Sleeping Dreams is all I pray. I travel far across the Milky Way. That song, I can't remember the name of. Dreams, I believe, is the name of the
yeah.
song.
Yeah.
That song is cool. But
You
then
know
you
what? I share the same exact opinion of you because they were smart when they had to switch. I mean, how much like getting Sammy Hagar to be the lead singer of your
sure,
band? I mean, that's like Van Halen 2.0 right there.
yes,
And I had the same opinion. I love Sammy. I Can't Drive 55, and all his older stuff from Montrose, and to get
mm-hmm.
Sam, and they didn't try to be the same Van Halen. They did
Right,
retool,
yes.
and I didn't have a problem with it either. But
They had a
I don't
different
feel like we
sound,
had to be
kind of,
we didn't have to be forced to pick.
and they had their, in my opinion, their sound was, it was a different sound of Van Halen, but it worked.
Yeah,
It's
right.
just like when John Corabi joined Motley Crue, that was a dang nuclear bomb dropped from the sky. That wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
And now you
That
don't
was a
have,
disaster. It's a shame for him because it wasn't
sure, wasn't
John's
his
fault.
fault. No,
No, it just didn't work. And I'm having a hard time right now with that Mick Mars isn't in the band.
that's just what I was getting ready to say.
I just having a hard time, and I am so lucky that I was able to see them again. I was able to see them when they were here at Staples in LA, and then I also couldn't get enough. The very last show was in Vegas, and I went out there with a couple buddies and got to see that very, very last show. And then it was supposed to be the last show,
Mm-hmm.
and then that's when all the hoopla happened. And I don't know, I'm not picking sides, but I feel bad what happened to Mick, you know. And we all don't know the true story, but next
Yeah.
thing you know it, he's out and they're going on a tour to keep it going to
with John
worldwide. And then
with
John 5 is in
with
the,
John
so
Five, yeah.
yeah, so I don't know,
Not
but
that John Five's not a good guitarist. Don't get me wrong,
no,
but
he's insanely good.
and I don't know if it got to the point to where Mick just couldn't tour anymore. But my opinion of Motley Crue is, and I know there ain't a chance in hell of him ever listening to this podcast, but Motley Crue's number one problem is Nikki Sixx.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It's just my opinion because
Yeah.
he is my way or no way. It's my band. I created this band. Yada yada yada. He's the one that initially wanted to kick Vince out of the band. Where did that get you? Nowhere.
Yeah.
You know. But I was fortunate. When COVID hit, we had stadium tour tickets, and 3 years later, we actually got to go see the stadium tour.
Uh-huh.
That we saw him up in Charlotte, and my personal opinion is Vince Neil needs to just go on and remember his heyday.
Yeah.
And go on, pack it up, and ride off into the sunset.
It's hard in this day and age now, and I'm looking at everyone, and it's like, hey, I'm getting older, I'm getting fatter, I'm getting grayer.
As am I.
I can't sing like I used to too. And so, but it's a shame that he just can't hit those high notes anymore. Even Stephen Pearcy, I love him dearly. He has his age,
Sure.
I think he's like in his mid to upper 60s now.
Yeah.
It's hard to growl like that and hit those rough voice, those rough notes, and then try to hit because he could do both back in the day, hit those high notes like I'm Insane, which is my favorite Rat song of all time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and then hit the growl notes, wanted man, or
But you're that age. If somebody honestly thinks a man in his 60s is you're going to go out there, he's going to sound just like he did in 1984.
Yeah.
But I admire him. We saw him at M3. He put on a hell of a show. He's a good showman.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I didn't have a problem with how he sang at all. I was just glad that he played the whole Invasion of Your Privacy album from start to finish.
Yeah. Yeah. No, they're doing the Round and Round, Out of the Cellar. Yeah. So, but I love him. He's still one of my top favorites. I was just making a comment of like, even one of my favorites can't hit the notes, and I don't expect him to, and he adjusts. And if anyone wants a good follow him, because he really cares. Like Bret Michaels, I would say Bret Michaels and Stephen Pearcy care about their fans a ton. Yeah. He might even, he messages me periodically, he'll say certain things, right. And he really cares about the fans, I love Stephen Pearcy, man.
Well, they're still, these fans that have followed him since the 80s are still making him money.
Yeah.
And they're trying, that's my whole thing with Instagram, and hopefully with this podcast is I'm not going to be somebody that has 10 million people that listens to their podcast every week. It's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. But if the handful that listen to it, if what's talked about or what's played puts a smile on their face, it's like, I remember exactly what I was doing when I heard that song for the first time. I remember the girl I was dating, or I remember I had a 1986 Pontiac Trans Am. It was solid black, and it had a Pioneer stereo in it. It had a Blaupunk amp in it. I had a kicker box in the back of it, and I turned that song up so loud it would rattle the windows. That's the point of what I do on Instagram and the podcast. It makes me happy. It takes me back to a simpler place in life that I didn't have rent to pay. I didn't have to worry about if the paycheck was going to stretch all the way to the end of the month. I just turned it in. I just put it in. I turned it wide open, and I didn't have a care to the world. Does it make sense?
I agree with you. I love it. And that's how we met, because exactly. we have a circle of friends that you followed and I followed, and somehow we all, maybe 6 months ago we connected because of, Instagram tries to suggest things and stuff like that. And I saw your post, and it did exactly what you wanted. It put a smile on my face, and then I'm just remembered, and you're posting all the bands that I liked, even the obscure ones, and I was just like, and then I would just occasional message you, I didn't know if you would reply, but that's the beautiful thing about Instagram. And then we start chatting slowly, and then here we are, and I love what you do, and it does put a smile on my face, and I'm assuming a lot of other people, because there were a lot of other real life issues going on in the 80s. And then on a serious note, that's when AIDS started getting. And then that was scary at the time. So it just makes you remember those times that were still amazing, and puts a smile on our face. And like you said, I remember driving home from the beach, hearing this song, on the radio, or, I remember making out to my girlfriend when this song came on the radio.
There you go. Exactly.
So
there was no better decade to have. There was no better decade, in my opinion, to have grown up, or like I said, the first half of the 80s when I was younger, it was Duran Duran, it was Thompson Twins, all that kind of stuff. But the other half of the 80s was hair metal, but the whole 80s period experience was the best time is the best time, in my opinion, to have grown up.
Yeah. And it's interesting when we were exposed to the 80s the hair bands and stuff. Like when I first, heard Round and Round, I was just, oh, you kidding me? And then you love the band so much, then you find out they had the EP with those 6
Yes.
songs, that was kind of the same with me with Def Leppard as well, because with Def Leppard, it was, all of a sudden you find out their 2 previous, CDs, and they rocked even harder, it's just a lot of the bands rocked harder. And then, of course, the way it was going a little bit more, bubblegum commercial,
Oh, yeah.
You got to have the hits instead of rocking all the time.
You wanted to get on MTV. You wanted to be on the radio. Yeah. So it calmed it back a bit. Right.
And then you have, Guns N' Roses doing the 8-minute ballad,
Exactly.
So everyone, even including our band, needed an 8-minute, 7-minute ballad that went on forever.
Well, it's funny you said it. I have a book. I let somebody borrow it. I can't remember the name of the book, but it starts out with Quiet Riot, and it's just excerpts from all the way through the book. But they talked about back then, the record companies pushed you to make a ballad for the simple reason, if MTV ever picked it up and played it, you were going to be rich. And those silly ballads, Don't Close Your Eyes, Every Rose Has Its Thorn, I Won't Forget You, Babe. That's what really shot these guys into the stratosphere.
I remember you.
Made them money.
Skid Row.
Yeah, Skid Row. Yes. And that's really what got them really famous. And even reading that book, Kip Winger was saying that they make more money now than they made back in the 80s for the simple fact they don't have a manager. They manage themselves, they book themselves, and it's a lot smoother process than it was, because you put an album out 2 days later, you're on a bus for 12 months. And then you come back to the Whiskey A Go-Go. Yeah, their album's been out for a year, and now they're going to sing all the hits from their album. And you waited a little bit, you made another album, and you went right back out on the road again. But they were making crazy money. The ones that made it. So,
right. Yeah.
I saw a few concerts. Bands came around here. One of the first ones I saw was Bon Jovi and Skid Row, and that was the New Jersey tour.
Yeah,
Skid Row was still playing their first LP, and they kicked Bon Jovi's rear end from the front to the back, because that was 2 different elements of music. You got Skid Row that's just taking a baseball bat and knocking you in the head with it, and then you got John Bon Jovi running around singing about bad medicine.
Yeah. Then Skid Row, Sebastian live is one of the best vocalists that I've ever seen. I've seen him numerous times.
Yeah.
And he can just nail the notes no matter what mood he's in, no matter how much he's drank. That guy can sing. Period.
I'm impressed with him with what he's got out now. I heard some of it. I listened to The Shark. It's a station, and Nautilus is the platform or whatever. And it's a hair metal called The Shark, and they play his new music on there a lot. And I'm pretty impressed. He's still got the rock and roll down, and he still got he can hit some of the notes.
And then at the M3, you got to see Bret Michaels, who I feel puts on and cares about his fans so much. Yes. And he wants to kill it every night for the fans, that he puts on still an energetic. How does he do that? How does he look so good? Being diabetic as well, that it's just amazing of a show. he puts on for the fans.
Well, the good thing, the good thing about the bands nowadays, and it's not all of them, but it's the majority of them. You go see Faster Pussycat. Faster Pussycat's going to sing about the 7 songs that you know, that you care about. Bathroom Wall, Poison Ivy, their ballad that they had out. Lynch Mob, George Lynch came out there. Of course, Lynch Mob didn't have that many videos, but their 2 albums that they put out were great. And he even played some Dokken too. So I mean,
cool.
You're getting a little Dokken. Dora came out there. Dora Pesh played the songs that you knew, not the junk that off the album she just put out that nobody even knows she even put out a new album. Nobody wants to hear that. That's what kind of angered me about Def Leppard at the stadium show. You know, they had recently came out with a new album. That's what they played. And then at the end of it, they played Photograph. They played Foolin'. They did play like Women. They played a lot of the Hysteria stuff, but they played all the stuff off that new album. Nobody wants to hear that. I'm sorry. You're not selling out this stadium to hear you play songs from La La Land or whatever the name of it is. And because the crowd says nothing, but then they play Pyromania and the place goes back crap crazy.
Right. That's when you need to call an audible like in football and go, guys, set list, we're going to change. Right. Yeah. We're going to do switch 626.
Yes.
You know,
just if these people are still paying good money to come see you play, go play the stuff they know. Like Stephen Pierce, he played that whole album and he played the whole thing. Every word, he played the whole thing and kept the crowd going. And that's like when Kicks was always the closing act at M3, but they retired from the M3. They only played what you wanted to hear. They played Midnight Dynamite. They played Cold Blood. They played Blow My Fuse. Everything you wanted to hear is what the Cool Kids. It was about one of the first songs you ever heard them play. That's what they played. So
and they had a pretty decent album a while back. I don't know if it was like 8 to 10 years ago, but they stick to what we want to hear. As hair metal rule people, that we want to hear the hits. That's why we work hard. We go to the concerts still and see all that stuff. And just that's why that's smart of Lynch Mob to play some of the Dokken stuff as well, and then Michael Sweet has been doing some projects with
George Lynch
as well. And so they have some pretty cool stuff. And I just heard some of the new Striper stuff they did, To Hell with the Amps, and they did some of their songs acoustically.
I haven't heard that yet.
That was pretty cool, actually. I listened to some of it, and they sound good. They always have, actually. He has a really decent voice, and I've always liked Striper back in the day. It didn't bother me. Everybody had their own opinion. I've always believed in God. Wasn't living a godly life, but I am more now than I was back then. But I still love me some Striper.
And can you imagine? I think I talked about it on one of my podcasts. Can you imagine Striper was on the same stage as Wasp? That's heaven and hell going in 2 different directions right there.
Yeah.
With me, Striper being a Christian band, but yet they were on the Sunset Strip constantly. But they had a following for the simple reason is they had some great heavy rock music, and people weren't listening to what he was singing. They were just listening to what they were playing,
Right. And they had some great guitar solos and harmonizing, and they were some great musicians too. Their sound was very different too, just like the Eddie Van Halen sound, the Rat sound. There's certain, you hear one note and you go, oh, that's Eddie Van Halen. That's Van Halen. That's Rat. That's Motley Crue.
I know who that is.
Yeah. So they did have that great sound as well. Yeah. That's awesome. So,
well, sir, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
I appreciate it. It's been great. We might have to do a part two because
Yeah, I was getting ready to say because Zoom will eventually knock me down if I go too far over an hour. But yes, we could definitely have a part two, and we can pick up where we left off. Most definitely.
yeah, no worries. Hey, and I appreciate you having me on. I just got to say to some of the people that would listen and are listening, and that they keep supporting you. I love what you're doing. I know, and I've heard a few of your podcasts already, and I heard you get a little emotional on your first one,
I did.
and I loved it because that showed me and everyone else how much this truly does mean to you and what this meant to your life and
Yes.
your past life and your future life and your right now life. So thank you also for giving it all you got, because you do. And I
Well,
appreciate it.
I appreciate it, sir. And we will talk again. And God bless you. And I thank you for taking the time to do this.
All right.
All
Take her
right.
easy.
Take care,
Thanks
brother.
again.
Bye bye,
Bye
sir.
bye.
Bye. Thank you for tuning in to the latest episode of the Hair Metal Rules podcast. A big thank you to Craig Gerber for coming on the show and sharing his stories of the Sunset Strip and his antics at KNAC. Man, how cool would it have been to play the Strip and work at the hottest radio station in California? Craig, I really enjoyed it. Listeners, I appreciate your support and hope the things we discuss on the show bring back some great memories for you. Until next time, keep rocking and stay tuned for more shows filled with exciting talks about your favorite hair metal bands. Until next time, so long and God bless you all.